I have never told this story before, but I think it's time that I do. In 2019, I was diagnosed with highly active relapsing remitting multiple sclerosis, and that diagnosis not only changed but saved my life, and I'm not exaggerating. Multiple sclerosis became my superpower. But let's start at the very beginning. So in 2018, it was February, I went to bed with the flu, and the next morning I woke up and not only did I not feel well, I realised that I couldn't really feel my feet. I had a weird pins and needles sensation that went from my big toe, spread across my feet and travelled up towards my hip. It was about 3 o'clock in the morning, and I texted my aunt, who is a very senior, very professional nurse, and I just texted her at 3 o'clock in the morning, didn't know if she'd be up or not. And I said, is it normal that I'm experiencing pins and needles with the flu? And she was at work, so she texted me back straight away and said, no, it's not normal. So I called 111 because she told me to, and they started asking me questions. Can I feel like my legs? Can I feel my bladder? And the answer was no, but I wasn't really alarmed at this point because at this period of my life, I was incredibly burnt out. I didn't have the emotional nor the mental capacity and awareness to be concerned about my own health. But because the pins and needles had progressed from my big toe up into my hips and my ability to walk when I tried to go to the loo was greatly reduced, I knew something was wrong, and I knew it was wrong enough that I needed to seek some medical advice. So 111 were concerned. So anyone who's listening who's not from the UK, 111 is the non-emergency medical number. So the emergency medical number is 999 and 111 is a non-emergency one. Anyhow, I then messaged my older sister probably about 6 a.m. in the morning, and she was just like, yeah, you need to go and be seen by someone. So she sent an Uber to my house to take me to the out of office or out of hours doctor's department, urgent care unit. And I remember trying to leave the house and feeling like I was in a 70s astronaut spacesuit, like I was walking against gravity, concentrating really hard to feel my feet and pick one up after the other. So I got into the Uber. I met my sister at the urgent care unit at the hospital, and the doctor was doing a lot of different investigations, and they thought at the time it might have been something called Guillain-Barré, which is a very rare autoimmune condition where paralysis travels up from the foot to the rib cages and can paralyse the lungs and so forth. So he was doing different tests, and whilst I couldn't really feel anything in my lower body, it wasn't progressing any further up my hips. But one thing that was incredibly clear was that my vitals weren't good. So from the urgent care unit, the doctor sent me to A&E to be sat on a drip and get fluids back into my system, because this started with me having the flu the night before. So I was in A&E at the local hospital on a drip. I remember a stray pit bull came into the hospital, and I'm sat there with next to like incredibly reduced low mobility on a drip, and this stray pit bull's just walked into the hospital. And this is Croydon, South London. So anyone who's familiar with the UK, familiar with Croydon, the reputation's not that great. So I didn't know who this pit bull belonged to or whether it was friend or foe. Thankfully, the pit bull was calm. She was lovely. She had no interest in anyone. And then she just walked off. Where? I don't know. So that was the first 48 hours of me having what I then came to know was MS symptoms. So by late February, I was still experiencing immobility, very much sporadic at this point. I was using muscle memory to be able to walk. I didn't look like I had a normal gait because I didn't have a normal gait. I was really concentrating hard to connect my mind to my muscle in order to walk. There were some times where I just couldn't go into the office at all because I couldn't walk. There were other times where I could drive to work. So I worked in a regional office, so I could drive to work. But by the time I pulled up to park near the office, I couldn't really feel my lower body, and I'd have to wait in the car till I could regain some level of feeling and control to then walk to the office. I remember one time I had pulled up at work, I had waited in the car to regain a level of feeling and control. And by the time I got to the office, there was a little curb just outside. And in front of the office got huge glass so you can see everything coming. And it so happened that my colleague was standing at the window. And as I got to the curb, because I couldn't really feel my lower body, I misjudged it. And I didn't pick my foot up high enough to just step over the curb. And I tripped. And when I got into the building, that's when I found out that he had seen me, because he started laughing about the fact that I tripped. And I hadn't told anyone I was suffering with immobility and loss of feeling in my lower body. So I just laughed it off, like, ha ha ha, yeah, I tripped. It's too early in the morning, haven't had my coffee yet, and kept it pushing. By March, I started getting excruciating migraines for the first time, and I was forced to take time off of work because I couldn't keep my eyes open. Lights felt like there were pins going through my eyeballs. I felt like my skull was being crushed, and I couldn't stay awake. I was in an incredible and intense amount of pain, could not be around lights whatsoever. And yeah, so I took some time off work. I think I took like literally a week, because by that point I started to feel paranoid that my colleagues were going to see my performance had started to slip. I felt like my performance was starting to slip. I didn't want anyone to perceive that I was incapable of doing the job, because at that point I'd only been in the job for about 9 months. And yeah, as a former stress addict and overachiever and someone who was completely lost and burnt out at the time, the worst thing that could have happened to me is people perceive that I was struggling. I had built such a strong facade for the last 9 months. Given that I started my first investment job 4 days after my mom's funeral, I was not going to let that mask slip for anyone, despite the fact that I was experiencing a loss of mobility and now excruciating migraines. So I took 5 days off work. Friday morning, 5th day of taking off work, I decided I was actually going to go back to work, because the following week I had a holiday booked and I didn't want anyone to think I was faking it. So Friday morning I get up and I'm in front of the mirror ready to do my makeup, and I close my left eye and I realise I can't see anything out of my right eye. And I don't know how long I'd lost the eyesight in my right eye for because the body's really good at compensating. So if you were to close or put your hand over one of your eye, you can see perfectly well out of the other eye. So I don't know how long I'd lost my vision for. Plus, the majority of that week, my eyes were closed because of the migraines. So I went to work that Friday, would not recommend that whatsoever, but the paranoia, the desire to be seen as capable was so overwhelmingly strong. That's what propelled me to work. And so I got to work, didn't tell anyone. That Friday was the 10th of March because it was my sister's birthday, so I remember it clearly. The following day, the 11th of March, she had a house party. So I was at my sister's house party with minimal feeling in my lower body. So strong with mobility, but was able to be mobile, just couldn't feel it much. And a blind right eye. Didn't tell anyone. The next morning, Sunday morning now, it's the 12th of March, and I let my older sister know that I couldn't see out my right eye. Up until this point, the only person that I had shared I was struggling with physical symptoms was my older sister. Didn't tell anyone else. Neither my dad, my other siblings, my friend. Didn't tell anyone but my older sister. So Sunday morning, I've disclosed to my sister that actually I've lost the eyesight in my right eye. And she said, you need to go to A&E. There's this A&E hospital in London that specialises in eye. Like, you could just walk in there. So I knew I didn't want to go on Sunday. But I knew I had to go on Monday because I had a flight booked on Tuesday. And I knew that if the blindness was due to pressure, I wouldn't be safe to fly. And I wanted to go on this holiday. So Monday morning rolls around now. And I go to the A&E hospital, Moorfields Eye Hospital in London. And at this point, I've got feeling back in my lower body, because I know I went in there in heels. I didn't want them to think or know all that was happening. So I went in heels to try and make myself feel as good as possible. And I spent hours, like maybe 4 to 5 hours in that hospital being investigated by the nurses. And I could see them shining the light in my eye, and then looking at each other, having like these little quick hurried conversations, then re-shining the light in my eye, then turning off the main lights, and then putting the light back in my eye and discussing with each other. So on reflection, clearly my case wasn't normal based on their reaction at that time. But again, I didn't have the mental or emotional capacity and awareness to be present in what was going on. I just knew I had to get my eye checked out so I could go on holiday tomorrow. So anyhow, at the end of the 4 to 5 hour investigation, a consultant comes into the room and she says to me, Subira, we need to write a letter to your insurance company to reschedule your holiday. I said, doctor, is the blindness due to pressure? She said, no, but I said, no, but we can deal with this when I get back. So she said, okay, if you insist. I said, I insist. If I am safe to fly, I'm flying tomorrow. So she let me go. She wrote up a referral letter and so forth and let me go. So I left the hospital. I went over to Oxford Street, because it's like a couple of stops on the tube, did some last minute holiday shops, and then the next day I was in Gatwick Airport in a wheelchair, blind in my right eye, and I flew out to Cape Verde and had the most incredible time ever. I kid you not. The moment the plane landed in Cape Verde and they opened up the doors, there was a wheelchair there waiting for me. I got into the wheelchair because I was still experiencing weakness and loss or sensitivity in my lower body. But the moment my big toe touched the tarmac, I felt revitalized. I said, get me out of this wheelchair. The sun was shining, it was beaming on me, and I felt revitalized. I said, get me out of this wheelchair. And I walked into immigration. Now, I still had blindness in my right eye, but it didn't stop me. So once I got to the hotel, I rested the first day because I needed the rest. It took it out of me traveling. But then the next day, they had what they call like their pool party, and the Cape Verdean music sounded incredible and reminded me of Caribbean music. So I got up and danced. I may actually insert a video here. So
don't be shy, Michelle. Good dancer today, studio. That's all. Yes. Our second class from our restaurant. Oh, yeah.
Despite the fact that I couldn't really feel my lower body and I was blind in my right eye, I had the most incredible time. The most incredible time dancing to Cape Verdean Funana, their traditional music. Long story short, the holiday was only 7 days and I had to come back to reality. So I flew back to the UK and I started asking myself, like, surely there has to be more to life than feeling like I'm at rock bottom and I'm barely surviving, gasping for air and drowning in plain sight. Now, this was still March of 2018. I carried on working, but things were getting worse with regards to my health. The immobility was becoming more frequent. The blindness still had not fully recovered itself yet. And now I really was starting to feel paranoid. But I was still keeping up the facade that all was well. So only my older sister knew what was going on. As far as everyone else was concerned, I was still good. So much so that June of 2018, that year, my 25th birthday, I flew to the Philippines with a few of my work colleagues who had become my friends, including my line manager and 2 of my other friends from the organisation, and we had the most incredible time island hopping around the Philippines, which confirmed to me again that actually there's very much environmental and lifestyle factors here that are triggering how I'm feeling, but I'm still incredibly unwell. Throughout 2018, I was constantly going in for MRI tests. I'd have to leave work early or maybe work in the London office to travel to the hospital without anyone knowing. And things were incredibly confusing. But again, because I was so burnt out, I didn't have the emotional or the mental capacity and awareness to realise just what an effect it was having on me. What I was aware of, though, was the paranoia. So by autumn, September, probably around September 2018, I decided that I was going to take the leap and do what most people do when things are falling apart and look for greener grass. It was a well-known fact at the time in investment consultancy that if you left and went to asset management, you could be paid more money for less complicated work. And I thought that would be the answer to my issue. Maybe I needed more money and less complicated work. So despite the debilitating and disabling symptoms of the lack of mobility, the lack of blindness, and then with the lack of sensation in my lower body came the lack of control over my bladder, I managed to get a promotional job in asset management. A higher pay package, less complicated work. Thought that was my answer. So by November 2018, I had moved into a new job and things got worse. Now I was no longer commuting to work via my car, driving to a regional office. I was now having to commute on public transport, i.e. Bus, train into London in the middle of rush hour to get to my new office. And that added pressure of working in a new job, still feeling insecure about my position in the investment world, therefore overachieving and overperforming to compensate, as well as the fact that I'm now dealing with, quite frankly, the negative energy of the morning commute. Everything took its toll, and it got to a point that on my way home from work, every single time I would lose the mobility in my lower body, lose the sensation, lose the mobility. It got then to a point that I started to lose my mobility and sensation in my lower body on the way to work as well. It just got incredibly stressful. And so what I would do once I got to the London office, I'd make sure I get there particularly early so I had enough time to go upstairs. I think it was like the 11th floor or something. And there was a view that looked out over London, and I would make myself a peppermint tea. And I would just sit on the floor in front of this huge window, just looking out over London, giving myself time to do some breathing exercises, because breathing exercises really can help to reduce inflammation or the inflammatory response in the body. It's not about meditation. It really is the physiological breath work that can help to reduce the inflammatory response. And stress causes inflammatory response. So that was way into winter of 2018. That December 2018, I went back to Cape Verde. I had realised that that was like my soul's home and it's exactly where I needed to be to feel revitalised and feel good. So I went back to Cape Verde in 2018 for 2 weeks this time with 2 girlfriends, and I was there for Christmas and New Year's. By the time it got to December 31st, 2018, I was stood at the hotel, at a bar, looking over the beach with a glass of Prosecco in my hand. And I just said to myself, I can't do this anymore. I can't do this anymore. When I get back to London in 2019, we need to sort this out. Problem was, at the time I had £8,500 worth of consumer debt that I had used because I felt like retail therapy was easier than real therapy, and retail therapy is easier than real therapy. It's just not a wise decision to make. But when your mental health is at an all-time low and you are having suicidal ideations, you don't even perceive yourself to have a future that you need to fund. So you end up spending money. I'm a millennial, so you end up spending money like YOLO. You only live once, because you only see yourself living for that day, because your mental health just cannot fathom that you need to fund a future, because the future does not look bright whatsoever. So I get back to London January 2019, like the 3rd of January 2019, and I head back to work, and I'm back into the horrific cycle of losing my sensation and mobility in my lower body, experiencing anxiety and increasing depression at this point. And by February 2019, I was sat in front of a neurologist, and he said to me, I'm not 100%. I don't want to say 99% because that's basically 100%, but I'm 98% sure you have multiple sclerosis. I was speechless. Like, my world literally fell out underneath me. What was left of it completely was obliterated. My throat closed up, my eyes welled up with tears, and I was sitting next to one of my girlfriends, and I just froze. And to know means to know that I'm really speechless. I froze because I couldn't compute what I'd just been told. And when I finally did get my voice back, admittedly, the first thing I was concerned about was whether that would enable me to get cannabis therapy. Now, bear in mind, I don't smoke cannabis, but I did want to know at the time whether that means I would qualify. I did ask. And the consultant was like, not sure about that, but maybe we could do some more research. But that aside, I was perplexed. However, he said that he was 98% sure, which meant I had 2% to play with. And that 2% was going to be all that I was focusing on. I am very much a optimistic, realistic pragmatist. And whilst the odds weren't in my favour technically, there was still something to play with. So I started researching what stress and the immune system have in common. I started researching what burnout was, because by that point, burnout had entered the vocabulary, and I realised that's exactly what I was. And I ran with that 2%. Started doing a lot of research, started changing up my diet even more so, because up until this point, I was predominantly plant-based because burnout had stolen my ability to process animal products. But I wanted to really know what an anti-inflammatory diet was. I wanted to explore maybe what the Mediterranean diet was, because that's something that's often cited for people with multiple sclerosis. And so I ran with it. In March of 2019, a month later, I was called back into hospital with a new consultant this time, a new neurologist. And she said to me, oh yeah, so when they diagnosed you last month? I said, who diagnosed me last month? She said, the other consultant. I said, no. He said he wasn't sure, and he was 98% convinced I had multiple sclerosis. She went, no. You have multiple sclerosis. I have seen your scans. In fact, you've got highly active, relapsing, remitting multiple sclerosis, like one of the worst you can actually get. So what it means by me having had highly active, relapsing, remitting multiple sclerosis is that I would have a relapse, so MS symptoms, like the blindness, the immobility and so forth, before I'd even recovered from the first one. And I was having up to like 2 relapses within a month, and they expect people to have maybe 2 relapses within a year. So they were very frequent and very debilitating. So I sat there and I was thinking, hold on a second. Every time I have an MS relapse, it's immediately after a stressful situation. So what if I redefine MS from meaning multiple sclerosis to meaning multiple stress? Would that mean I can then focus on the triggers and the factors of stress in my life and dismantle those so that I would no longer have MS relapses? I wasn't having this discussion with anyone else, because when I first mentioned it to people around me, including medical professionals, they were very dubious and doubtful about it. So I kept quiet and I focused in on myself and decided I was just going to become obsessed with burnout, because burnout had become obsessed with me. I was going to take a look at my entire life and start putting out the fires of stress in my life, because stress is just like fire. When it's well managed and well utilized, we can use it to excel, to fuel us, to accelerate. But when stress is mismanaged or misused, or worse, we don't know it's occurring, it can actually consume us and in some cases be fatal. Now, I started putting that work into my life because up until that point, I had an incredibly stressful and tumultuous and traumatic life. And if you want to know more about that, I do have a TEDx talk that goes into that, but that's not the story. This is the MS story. So I was on a journey of paying off the debt, which had started in January 2019 when I came up from Cape Verde. And it's March at this point, so I knew that I could pay off my entire debt by May of 2019, which would give me the flexibility to resign from the investment industry and prioritize and focus on my health, which is what I did. So by the time May came, I resigned from the investment industry, and I realized that there's a difference between coping with stress and managing stress. And I'd been really good at coping with stress, but not managing stress. So quickly, the difference is when you cope with stress is like knowing how to swim. When you manage stress is like knowing how to surf. And life is more like an ocean than it is a swimming pool. And so whilst I've been really good at coping with the different stress and trauma that happened in my life, I was drowning in plain sight. And I made a decision that I was going to learn to surf. I was going to learn to effectively manage stressful situations in my life so that I wouldn't have to lose my health again. I created in this time something I called the burnout-free lifestyle, so a lifestyle that's stress mitigating, fulfilling and fun, And within 5 months of creating that framework and implementing that framework, I saw an end to the MS symptoms without any medical intervention. The last MS relapse I had was in 2019, November 2019, and it was optic neuritis, aka I lost the eyesight in my right eye again. And that was triggered by financial stress because as of May 2019 to November 2019, I was on universal credit. I was on government unemployment benefits, and the lack of financial flexibility I had was so stressful, it triggered an MS relapse. And I said to myself, we're not going through that again. So December 2019, I started throwing my CV out into the world. Probably not the best time to do it because Christmas was coming, but I needed a job. I needed to make money again because I was not going to lose my health again. And that kind of leads on into my story about how I got back into the corporate world and started my business, which is not part of the MS story. The MS story is that it took me 5 months to put the MS relapse into remission without medical intervention, and that's November 2019. From November 2019 to January 2023, I had been MS relapse free without medical intervention. But in 2023, I decided to start taking MS treatment, and that's because my view was not that I don't care for Western medicine or I don't trust Western medicine. I just don't want to be reliant on Western medicine that I have to take medication every day of my life. That's not the lifestyle that I envisioned for myself. So the analogy I can give you is, imagine there's a leak in your house. You can put a bucket underneath where the leak is and it'll collect the water. But eventually that bucket's going to get full and you're going to have to throw it out and put the bucket back or replace it with another one. I decided that the approach I wanted to take was, instead of just putting a bucket underneath the leak, I wanted to go find out where the leak was coming from, stem the flow at its source, and then call the plumbers in to repair it. So that was my approach. So from 2019 to 2023, that's 4 years, I redesigned my lifestyle and the way that I work so that I could stem the leak from the source. And by 2023, when I was confident that I had effectively managed my mental, physical health, as well as my lifestyle and my career, I then opted to take medication. And the medication I took was something called cladribine, aka Mavenclad. And at the time, I qualified for that particular medication, which is an incredibly expensive medication. So you have to qualify. And the qualifier is that you have to have highly active relapsing remitting multiple sclerosis or tried other avenues of medication that have not effectively worked. I was the former. I was diagnosed with highly active relapsing remitting multiple sclerosis, which was confirmed when they did a contrast MRI scan. And because I had qualified for it back in 2019, by the time 2023 came out and I was ready to take it, they still said yes. I didn't have to re-qualify or re-go through the process. And the reason why I decided to take medication in 2023 was, as I said, I had stemmed the flow from the source and I wanted the plumbers to come in, the experts, the professionals, to fix all things and clean up shop. But I also was close to turning 30. I was turning 30 in 2023. And it started to make me think about what I'd want to do in terms of family planning and eventually having children. And I knew that there was a timeline from when I started taking the Mavenclad, which is a form of chemotherapy, to when I ended the Mavenclad treatment and then when I'd be able to start having children. So off the top of my head, that was about a 2-year period. So I knew that I wouldn't be medically safe to have children until 2025. And even though at the present time, and at the time when I started taking it, I was single, and still am single currently, I knew I wanted to give myself the option by 2025, God willing, I meet a wonderful man, that I can then start planning the family that I've that my heart's desire wants. And that was really interesting, actually. Taking Mavenclad, I'm really grateful that it was very well tolerated. So much so, I had no effects. I had no side effects. And when I did my first bloods after my first treatment, my lymphocyte, my immune system had repaired by 75% when they thought it would be repaired by maybe 50% at the time. So it was so well tolerated. And my neurologist said the reason why it was so well tolerated, or that she believes it was so well tolerated, is because I genuinely have a burnout-free lifestyle. I have a lifestyle that is stress mitigating, fulfilling and fun. And I also have a healthy lifestyle. I was very much working out, doing HIIT exercises, going to the gym regularly, eating well generally. and that all contributed to the Mavenclad being really well tolerated. Just in case anyone's curious, how Mavenclad works is you take it over a 2-year period and then you're done with treatment forever, is what they say. So in 2023, January 2023, I took, I want to say 14 tablets over the space of 5 days. And then February 2023, I took another 14 tablets over the space of 5 days. And then in 2024, I took, 1 month took 14 tablets over 5 days, and then the next month took 14 tablets over 5 days. That's how the Mavenclad program works. And now effectively, I don't have to take medication anymore, which is why the only MS treatment, the disease-modifying therapy that I was willing to take was cladribine and Mavenclad, because it would give me the freedom to live life on my terms and how I want to do so. And so it is currently, what month are we in? September. It is currently September 2024 and I feel incredible. I am still relapse free. I'm still unaffected by MS. I have all the responsibilities of having a legal disability and none of the perks, by the way. I get no perks or benefits for having a disability, just the responsibility of looking after myself that bit much more and going to my hospital appointments. But I can honestly say that I'm so incredibly grateful for the MS diagnosis, because it gave me a hard reality check that up until that point I was just existing in life and not actually living. And I think a lot of us end up doing that. We're existing, inheriting societal or familial expectations from other people about how we should be living our life, but not truly owning our own lives, aka our lifestyles and careers, and showing up as who we want to be. Another reason I'm also grateful for the multiple sclerosis diagnosis is because MS has become like my superpower, in that I have like a natural barometer or like spidey senses for when I am feeling too overwhelmed or too stressed. So before I even get to a point of burning out, and praise God I don't, because I do practice what I preach and live what I teach. But if I do get particularly stressed or overwhelmed, my body will tell me first. I will start to feel pins and needles in my legs, not debilitatingly so, not disablingly so, just I will start to feel little bits of pins and needles, and I'm like, right, something somewhere, there's a leak somewhere, we need to go close the faucet off. And that is how I've been managing multiple sclerosis now for the last 6 years. Wow, 6 years. Over 6 years. 6.5 years is how I've been managing having a multiple sclerosis diagnosis. If there's anything you want to know more about, or you want me to go into more and further details about, please just leave a comment below, send me a message. But I'm sharing this all to say that life can be incredible post-diagnosis. My life post-diagnosis is 1,000 times better than my previous life. I went from being a burnt out, anxiously depressed, mess of investment analyst to an award-winning corporate burnout prevention consultant. And in the Bible, it says that God makes all things work for the people who love him according to his purpose and plan. Romans 8:28, I can promise you that everything that I've gone through has enabled me to be in a position to support and help other people go from being disempowered to empowered in their own life and taking back their personal power and live life on their terms. And I'm so incredibly grateful that his grace has brought me this far. So yeah, bye.